Welcome to the McAllister Report. We join John McAllister, top football evaluator, as he shares wisdom and interviews coaches and athletes from around the country. Enjoy today's podcast.
I'm John McAllister, and today I'd like to welcome you to the John McAllister Report, and we're going to go into the section of Coach's Corner. My guest today is one of the better head football coaches in the Cleveland area. Mac Stevens at Cleveland Heights High School. I think he's been there 8 years, and he's established the program. I think they were starting out 8 years ago, not very good at all. And now they had 38 players, and now this year they're over 100. And I think it speaks to his character, his class, and his ability to understand kids. He's a very good coach. He played in the NFL for a couple of years, and he played in Minnesota in the Big Ten, and he's from the Akron area. And I've known him for a number of years, not real well, but I've gotten to know him. And after this, reading about him, I have tremendous respect, more than I did before. So if you'll sit back and hopefully enjoy my conversation with the head football coach at Cleveland Heights High School, Mac Stevens. So like I said earlier, my guest today is Coach Mac Stevens, and I think he is one of the better top coaches in the Cleveland area. Cleveland Heights High School, big school, does a great job. And I told him before we came on here that I like him because he's not a jibber jabber guy. When he says something, it's short but sweet. And I really respect that. Coach, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. Been crazy busy with the off season and trying to get guys ready for this upcoming year, but things are good.
That's really good. You've got a couple of I know of at least two good assistant coaches that help you quite a bit, I would hope, don't they? But I mean, you've got good assistant coaches. And
oh yeah, I mean, my coaching staff, they make me look good. Trust me.
they hustle. I know that, and plus they're good kids guys.
Yeah,
huge. Okay, Coach, I did some research real quickly, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, Mac. But you have a very, very good resume. And you started at Akron Firestone, I think. Well, did you play for Coach Flossie? Who did you play for?
So actually, I played for Dave Marshall. He was at Firestone before Flossie.
Okay.
Dave Marshall was he was the guy that set my career, or one of the many people that set my career into motion in terms of football.
That's really good. That's a compliment to him right now. Then you went to Minnesota, right? Football?
Yeah, so Lou Holtz recruited me out of high school, and then he took the job at Notre Dame, and his defensive coordinator took over John Gutekunst, and that's who I ended up playing for 4 years.
He's a good man.
Oh, yeah.
He's
I believe it's Coach Gutekunst's son is now the GM at Green Bay, as a matter of fact.
Isn't it amazing? I thought there had been a connection when I saw the names, but this coaching profession is unreal. And I know you spent some time in the pros, and I don't want to go just real quickly, the pro experience, Mac?
Yeah. I'm blessed to say I was 1% of 1% for a couple of years there.
I read that.
My rookie year played under a guy named Pete Carroll, who's my defensive coordinator with the Jets, and actually ended up coaching my son at Seattle a couple years ago, and played a little bit with the Vikings, and then a little bit with the Toronto Argonauts in the CFL. But just, was a dream come true. That was something like all kids. I wanted to be an NFL football player, and just thankful that I had that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing, and not everybody can say they played in the NFL, whether it be one season, 10 seasons, or whatever.
That's right.
Not everybody can say that. Well, that's really good. And then it came back to Cleveland, or got back to Cleveland then? Is that where
Yeah. So, I grew up in Akron and lived in Minneapolis for almost 7 years, and then came back to the Cleveland area and just settled down in Cleveland. Didn't get into coaching right away, but eventually I helped start our youth league here in Euclid, and then became president of North Coast Youth Football Conference. Still serve as a co-president of that youth football conference, and then eventually got into high school coaching. I coached under Mike Rizzola at Euclid, and Tom Gibbons, and Ted Ginn at Glenville, Tom Shane at Bill Angela St. Joe's. So, I was fortunate to learn from some of the top coaches in Northeast Ohio, to be quite honest, and took a little bit of what worked for all of them and now apply it at Cleveland Heights.
And you've been there since what? For 5, 6 years, 7 years?
So I've been at Cleveland Heights. We just finished our 8th season. Time is flying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really neat. I've always been impressed with your facility when I go up there, and haven't been there for 2 years at Heights. I've seen you guys, but I haven't been at Heights, I don't think. Coach, let's get into I think your full-time job is now, besides coaching, which if they keep going, it's going to be a full-time job. They keep adding more days in May and June, but I'm being a little sarcastic, but what's your the full-time job then for the city?
So I am the recreation director for the city of Euclid. I've been here going on 21 years now. So I oversee youth programs, adult recreation programs, and senior recreation programs. Also oversee Briardale Golf Course and CEOR Ice Arena and numerous parks and playgrounds. So schedule's pretty hectic, to say the least.
I would think so. Sounds like it. I'm sure, again, you're only as good as your assistants, and I bet you have some good assistants in that program as well. Okay, let's get to football. It took me a couple of years to crack your shell a little bit, and I think about 3 years maybe or whatever, but then I really respect everything you do. And let's talk about you. I read where you mentioned the word trust. How important is it to trust people? People I don't care so much about. Coaches, yeah, but kids. What's that communication, Mac, with trusting kids?
Yeah, trust is huge, especially in my program at Heights. The one thing, especially nowadays, kids are so distracted with social media and everything else that's coming at them. So, as a coach and my coaching staff, we have to set a great example, a phenomenal example, so that we can gain the trust of these young men. And in our case, we've even had a couple of young women that have played in the Heights program. But every day it's setting that example and having high expectations for kids. One thing they know is that, we're going to coach them hard on the football field, but we're going to coach them even harder when it comes to just everyday life. Coaching football is easy, but when you can gain that trust between player and coach and player, it just makes everything else so much easier when it comes to, providing that guidance and direction that they need on and off the field.
Well, that's huge. And they've got to trust you. I told you earlier off the air that I think I guess it's because I'm old, but I'm honest and loyal, but I have a trust with a lot of kids. I mean, I know stuff that 24/7 doesn't know, and Rivals doesn't know, and all these guys, because they trust me and they
Right.
know that I'm going to help them. And I don't put up with much stuff, and but it's so great, it's so rewarding for me. Okay, what's it like? How do you get Mac? How do you get the best out of them in football? Because it's a tough life. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to use the word inner city, but that's so hard, because you said social media. You got a lot more than social media facing these kids. So
Yeah,
how
no,
do you,
there's
how do you communicate? That's kind of a stupid word, but how do you get through? How do you work with that?
well, you gotta understand kids and meet them where they're at. And one thing, coaching at Cleveland Heights, people think, well, you're coaching at a suburban school, but the reality is we're coaching a school that's in an inner rings suburb, and it's changed over the years, and it's getting tougher and tougher year to year. And what I'm finding is a lot of these kids live in a lot of dysfunction. And as a coach, we got to figure out how to navigate through that. So the way we do it is, we got to develop relationships with kids. And so it's not about just coaching a kid in football, but it's really developing a relationship. So when we get kids in our programs, oftentimes I'll take a group of kids, we'll go get a burger or go get wings somewhere. And I'll tell them, we're not going to talk about football. And sometimes they're surprised, but that allows me to get to know them, and they get to know me, and really get to know what I stand for. And then once that relationship is developed, then you kind of know what buttons to push, and know how to navigate through some of those tough situations that a lot of these kids have to live in.
Yeah. Well, it's so huge, and it starts when they're young too, doesn't it? I mean, as soon as you can be able to make contact with them, and like freshman football, I don't know your program, but as soon as you can do that, that's huge, right? Or not?
Oh, absolutely. My first year at Cleveland Heights, it was a rough year. I didn't know if we were going to get through that year. We started out 0-4, new to the staff. A bunch of kids transferred out, schools being rebuilt. We didn't have locker rooms, didn't have a weight room to access, didn't have running water near the field. It was just obstacle after obstacle. And I remember we finished that season. We played St. Ed's, who was #1 in the state at the time, ranked #9 in the country. They were #1 seeded team in Region 1, Division 1. We were 16th
You were
seeded.
16.
And we played them at Lakewood, and we had them on the ropes for most of the game. They ended up winning that game, and they went on to win the state title. But I mentioned that because, we had 38 players on the sidelines at that game. I look across the field, they had 100+ kids dressed. But as a staff and our players, we didn't flinch. We prepared the best we could and lined up and played. And now 8 seasons removed, we have upwards to 100 kids in our program. So it was just staying the course and believing in kids, and again, coaching kids on and off the field. And that's why I think we're in the position that we're in now versus what you saw 8 years ago.
That's really good. Do you encourage, totally different subject, and come back, because do you encourage kids to play more than one sport?
Yes.
Is that you on the spot? I don't mean to do that.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, that's at Cleveland Heights. One thing that we do at the end of a season, we try to tell kids, get involved with indoor track, go play basketball, go wrestle, go do something other than just playing football. Because one of the reasons I do that, a couple of reasons. I think, for these kids, they're not going to have these 4 years, but one time. Go out and do the most that you can. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, if a kid is running track or wrestling or playing basketball or whatever the sport is, that's another set of coaches' eyes that are on grades and behavior and making sure kids stay on track academically and socially. Too often we just worry about the football aspect, but the one thing I've learned over the years, if I got a kid that performs well in the classroom and stays out of trouble, you're going to see that on the football field. And that's the type of kid that's going to ultimately help you to win games.
And plus they're using different skills in those other sports as well. You know, I'm a big track promoter for football players, shot put, discus, sprints, relays, and everything. So it's what, obviously you're totally right, and just get them playing, I think, is huge. I think, Coach. Okay, let's jump to assistant coaches. What do you expect out of assistant coaches? Because let's face it, Coach, your program is coming. I mean, when I say coming, well, 8 years ago. So your program's now where it is. So what do you expect out of assistant coaches?
Yeah. So first and foremost, if you're going to coach at Cleveland Heights, you got to care about kids off the football field.
Okay.
You got to be willing to have those tough conversations that sometimes you got to have with a kid about maybe a girlfriend situation or some tough situation at home, or sometimes it's even being willing to buy a kid a pair of cleats or feed a kid. Then it's about having knowledge about the game, but more so than just having knowledge about the game, willing to work and do the little things that oftentimes people don't think about. So, I use myself as an example. Even though I'm the head coach and I get a lot of pats on the back, I'm the guy that's picking up equipment at the end of practice, picking up paper, cleaning up the locker room, doing all those things that everyone else forgets about. But I try to set the tone and set the example, not only for my players to see, but for the assistant coaches to see. But I also got to trust my assistant coaches. If for example, if I got to go talk to the athletic director about something, I got to know that assistant coaches are going to get practice running the right way. I got to trust that they're going to do research on opponents and just get our team ready to play. I kind of operate more as a CEO in a sense, and let the coordinators be the managers, and then the other assistant coaches just fill in where needed.
Well, I think obviously that's huge. Okay, let's talk about just a couple more things in recruiting. Mac, what's your perspective on college recruiting now? And you're going to have, I know you have players, you're going to have you've got a lot, and they're going back down to freshmen and sophomores recruiting these guys. Silly offers at that age. But how do you put that? How do you handle that with recruiting?
Yeah, college recruiting has become a whole different animal nowadays versus even 5 or 6 years ago. As you mentioned, some of these colleges are throwing out offers hand over foot, and then it's making kids get jealous of other kids. But the one thing that I try to do is just emphasize to our kids, number one, make sure you understand what the NCAA requirements are, because I see kids that are getting offers that are barely at a 2.0 GPA, and it doesn't make any sense. But also, I talk about, to our kids about, preparing yourself academically, preparing yourself socially, and then enjoying the high school football experience. If you do all of those things, everything else will take care of itself. Don't get so focused on getting offers and forget about being a good teammate. Because again, you're only going to go through this experience, this 4 years of high school football one time. And the reality is, there's only a handful of guys that get the Division I scholarship. And then there's a few that get the Division II package or a Division III package. But enjoy this high school ride because there's nothing like it. And again, like I think about my own experience. I'm fortunate in having had the opportunity to play at all levels, but for me, there was nothing better than my senior year of high school football playing against Akron Buchtel at their stadium. I'll never forget that, playing in the Akron Rubber Bowl on Friday nights and back-to-back double headers. I remember those games more than I remember playing up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, or playing in NFL stadiums. So I tell kids there's nothing like Friday Night Lights, in my opinion.
That's really good, and I do think recruiting's getting worse, and I think the media has a lot to do with that. A lot to do with it because they're trying to make money for themselves, and they're not always honest. And recruiting itself is an ugly business, I think. And you've been through it a lot and all different perspectives and understand that. But I'm a kids guy, so consequently, I worry about that stuff. I know they're big boys, but they're boys, and when they get to college, I know high school is a business, but college is a business. And you're either producer, you're going. I mean,
that's right.
It's a fun business. College is a business, and it's ugly, and a lot of kids can't handle it after they get there. Okay, just a couple more questions because it's really interesting. I coached 50 years ago. How do you guess high school football has changed? Just give me a couple of things that have changed. How has it changed as you look back?
Yeah, I guess from my own personal experience, when I played at Firestone High School, only time Dave Marshall, my head coach, really had to interact with my parents was at the season-ending banquet.
Yeah,
my parents didn't interfere. They didn't say I should be the starting whatever quarterback or whatever position. So that's one thing. Secondly, recruiting has taken the focus away from what you see on Friday night football games, or I should say social media. I think too often kids are so consumed with getting the highlight or performing for the cameras that are, in the end zones, and they forget about, being about their teammates. And then obviously, this recruiting that we experience nowadays is just different from, back in the day when I played, when you had to send in a Betamax cartridge to a coach, or even when one of my sons graduated in 2013, and he sent DVDs still at that time to college coaches, whereas now, it's just different.
You can look at it right here.
That's right. It's instant, with Huddle and some of the other programs that now you can just instantaneously send highlights. I think the focus has become more about the highlights than about the game anymore.
Yeah, it has. And I think sometimes with so much has changed now, they don't even go through the head coach half the time. The media doesn't, the parents don't. I mean, they get on these silly recruiting services and stuff like that, and sometimes they don't even go through the head coach. And, that's sad. But high school is still good. I still enjoy it so much. Tell me, you've kind of done it because you've done such a good job, but what should kids, how do they get better, Mac? How does, we talked about a defensive back you have, but give me three things, we'll leave it. How do kids get better? You've experienced it with Tyreek and some of the other players you've had. You've got a young player coming, more than one another example, and I'm brainstorming, and I forget his name. His dad coached for you. He's down in Cincinnati now.
Justin Watley.
I saw him when he was an 8th grader, and he was just a fun guy. And then as he got a little bit older, he got a little more chattery, but he worked hard, and he's done well.
Yeah, you know what? Three things that we emphasize to help these young players get better is very simple. We call it the Heights Blueprint. And any kid that's come through our program that's followed the Heights Blueprint, when they left our program, they landed in a more successful situation. And what I mean is, well, the Heights Blueprint is just based on three pillars. The first being academic excellence. We demand academic excellence. That might mean something different for each kid, but we try to stress that every single day. Secondly, being socially responsible. Be nice to your teachers, treat the young ladies in the hallways the proper way, do your chores at home, be involved in your community, and just do the right thing every day. And then lastly, from an athletic standpoint, it's just give us effort, or give your teammates effort.
Yeah.
And if you can do those three things, ultimately you're going to be on a pathway to success.
It's a great closing. Coach, thank you very much for being on my podcast. I really, really appreciate it a lot.
Well, John, I appreciate everything that you do. I've watched you from afar for a number of years, even when I was an assistant coach. And I love what you do because it's all about helping young people get from one place to another. And you're always giving out pieces of wisdom that I think are beneficial to young people. I saw you recently at the Browns High School showcase, and some of the information you shared with those young people on that Saturday morning was right on point. And I love that it's not about your ego, but it's just about saying things to benefit young people. So keep doing what you're doing. I know I believe you said a young 74 years of age.
I'm about to be your dad, man.
But we appreciate what you do for the high school football community.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Coach.